we have declared our circle class to be the child class of geometric object class. So we have told our compiler where to look for the common attributes. But we must keep in mind that we have not yet brought in the common attributes from the geometric object. That means since we are inheriting the common attributes from the geometric object, we must do it explicitly. This is not done automatically. So how do we do it? You see that when we omitted the data fields from this part, we already have some errors here. What is the error? The field, it says the field geometric object dot color is not visible. That means there is a code for color attributes in the geometric object field, but it is not here in the circle class. So somehow we must have some mechanism which will bring the color attributes into our circle class. So how do we do it? We actually need to construct the object of geometric object. That means we need to use the constructor of geometric object here in our circle class to initialize the data fields of geometric object. So you remember, or you can actually guess, when we call our parents, we don't call our parents by their name. Rather, we call them father, mother, or baba, ma. So similarly, when we want to call or invoke the constructor of our parent class or superclass, we don't need, or we won't actually use it by calling the class name. Rather, we will use the keyword super. So when we have this super keyword, super means compiler will understand, okay, whatever class is the super class of this class, it will call that particular class's constructor. So what we want to do is we want to call the super constructor and we want to have these particulars. So we see that in our geometric object, in the geometric object no argument constructor, the color field is assigned blue, the field is assigned false, and it takes the local system type. So we can simply call the no argument constructor of super, which will call the no argument constructor geometric object, and this will have the same effect as having the color field to be blue and taking the system type from here. So this is how we get the color and field and date created in our circle class. We need to also do the same in the other constructors as well. So here we have the same, okay, the color default is blue and date created is the local system type. So we will omit this code because color is not automatically created here. Rather, we need to initialize color by calling the super no argument constructor. No argument constructor because here we put the default blue option. But let's look at here, the circle. We have input color and input field. So now we will actually call the super constructor where we will pass this color and field as parameters. So now if we match here that this super with two parameters, do we have any such constructor in our geometric object class? So in the geometric object class, see, there is a constructor which takes two input parameters, string color and boolean field, and it sets those two data fields, and then the date or time is taken from the system. So there is a similar constructor in the geometric object. So we are actually calling the overloaded constructor super here with two parameters. So now when we save this, you see that there are no more errors in this code. Okay, so when we say inheritance, what we need to do is we need to use the extends keyword and say which class we need to extend. So the circle is our subclass and geometric is our superclass. And when we say that, okay, it inherits the data fields, this inheritance is not done automatically. Rather, we actually need to call the constructor of the superclass using this super keyword inside of our constructor. So in the memory, when we actually when we reserve a memory for our own data fields, so when we create a circle, it means we are actually reserve memory location for our radius value. So in addition to this radius value, by calling this super constructor, we will also reserve the memory space for the data fields of the superclass. And in this way, in our circle class, we now have all the data fields from the geometric object and also its own data fields. So this is how we do inheritance in coding. Already seen why we need to call the superclasses constructor. So the question now is, are superclasses constructor inherited? We have just seen that, okay, they are not automatically inherited. Rather, we need to invoke them explicitly or implicitly. When we say we invoke them explicitly, we do this using the super keyword. We have seen, okay, that a constructor is used to construct an instance of a class. That means unlike properties and methods, a superclass's constructors are not inherited in the subclass. They can only be invoked from the subclass's constructors using the keyword super. That means if we don't put the super keyword inside our own constructor, we will not get the data fields from the superclass itself. So if the keyword super is not explicitly used by the programmer, the superclass's no argument constructor is automatically invoked by the compiler. And that's why we should always put a no argument constructor in a class which can be used as a superclass for some other classes. So a constructor may invoke an overloaded constructor or its superclasses constructor. So if none of them is invoked explicitly, the compiler puts super no argument constructor as the first statement in its own constructor. For example, if we have a class named A, we have the constructor of the class A here, and inside we have not written anything. Even if we have not written anything, the compiler will put a default super no argument constructor inside. Similarly, if we have this, that public A double D, some statement, but we have not put the super constructor here. So the compiler will put a super no argument constructor as the first statement of its own constructor. So the keyword super, we have now I have an understanding that this keyword super, it refers to the superclass of the class in which super appears. So for our circle class, super refers to the geometric object class. Maybe a student is a subclass of a person class. In that case, if we call super from student, it will refer to the person class. So this keyword, super keyword, it can be used in two ways. One is to call a superclass constructor that we have just seen, or to call a superclass method or superclass data field that we will see shortly. Some things we must remember is you must use the keyword super to call the superclass constructor. If you invoke the superclass constructors using its own name, then it will cause a syntax error. Also, this super keyword needs to be the first statement in your constructor. So let's look at our example code of circle. So instead of writing this super, if we write geometric object, see, that's an error. And it will say that the method geometric object is undefined for the type circle. So we need to put super here. The next point was that this super constructor calling, it must be the first line of our own constructor. So instead of writing it as the first line, if you put it in the second line, so see, this is again a compiler error. So it says constructor call must be the first statement in a constructor. So here this must be the first statement. Super. So we let's look at our other thing. Instead of writing this super here, we can also a class can also call its other constructors. So instead of doing this, we can write this and we can simply put 1.0 here. So what will happen when we call this circle no argument constructor, inside it will see that okay, this means circle itself, which takes a double parameter. So it will say okay, we have a circle constructor with double parameter. So from this line it will come here, and here it has the super keyword and it has the radius value set in the radius data field. So this is how we need to use the super constructor from the subclasses constructor. Now look at a problem of not writing no argument constructor in a superclass. So let's look at an example here. We have a class, public class apple extends fruit. So apple is our subclass and fruit is our superclass. Inside the apple class, we have no code. So you may wonder, since the question was find out the errors in the program, you may think that the error is this empty class itself. But we have seen previously that in a class, if there are no constructors, the compiler will by default put a no argument constructor. So the compiler will put an apple no argument constructor inside this apple class. Also, since apple is a subclass, inside the apple constructor, the compiler will also put a super no argument constructor. That means it will try to call the no argument constructor of the fruit class. In the fruit class, there is a constructor, but this constructor takes a string input. So when the default no argument constructor of apple calls the super no argument constructor of fruit, it will come to the fruit class, but there are no fruit no argument constructor here, and that is the error in this code. Next, we have said that super keyword is used to call the super constructor and also to call the superclasses methods and using superclasses data fields if the superclasses data fields are not private. So let's write a method in our circle class. Let's call it void print circle. So it will simply print some attributes of the circle, so we don't need to provide any parameters here. So inside we have this system.out.println. So maybe first it prints the color. So the color of the circle is, so now what we will do is we want or we need the color information. So if we simply put color, see, it's an error. What is the error here? So the error is the field geometric object dot color is not visible because color is not declared here. So color is an unknown attribute. It comes from the superclass. And how do we direct the compiler to bring it from the superclass? We need to put super here. So super dot color. Still you see it's an error. What is the error? It says the field geometric object dot color, it's not visible. It's invisible. Why? Because inside the geometric object class, we have declared the color to be private. So instead of getting this color directly, we need to put this get color public method, and now the error is gone. Then maybe we want to print the radius. So system.out.println the radius of the circle is, so for the radius is an attribute for our local class here, so we don't need to put any super or anything, so it's simply radius and there's no error. So this is how we must use the keyword super.